Rabbi Saroken.
Hey, Rabbi Schwartz.
How are you?
So excited to jump into Torah with you.
Yeah, this is a new initiative.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Kind of fun, exciting. Beginning of a new year.
Yeah.
Kind of getting into it's the old challenge of like the Israelites had at Sinai after that peak experience, which for a lot of our folks is the Yamim or even the High Holy Days. And then what do you do the next day when it's back to normal life? So we're hoping folks will take a little bit of a journey with us this year.
I love that. I love it. And really one of the best parts about our launching this now is that we're at the very beginning. So we're gonna drop eventually Genesis. So if you're tuning in today for the first time, we're going to be in the second of the Torah portions, which is Noach. And then hopefully you'll catch up with that one, and then we'll go through Genesis together.
Well, they always say, Ein mukdam u'me'achar b'Torah. There is no chronology in the Torah. And nevertheless, so really, it's always an interesting thing that there are, in actuality, sort of two creation stories in the early chapters of Genesis. You have the creation story that we all know, Bereshit bara Elohim, God created the earth and the heavens and the da-da-da-da-da-da. But then really Noach, our parsha this week, has a second creation story in many ways, because at the end of last week's parsha, the end of Bereshit, God kind of takes the plan, crumples it up and throws it in the trash can, and then says, I'm going to start from scratch almost.
Isn't it interesting that actually this past week in shul, you and I looked at that together, and I said it's a really depressing end to the first chapter. Remember that it was sort of this feeling of disappointing God, that human beings were disappointing God.
Yes, but and I also love that we didn't get a chance to, because it was during services, but I love that passage, those few verses, for two reasons. One is that there's that moment where God is so bitterly disappointed, and God says, "I'm done. Like, we just got to start all over again." And but then it says, I don't remember exactly the Hebrew, something like "V'noah matzah chen be'enei Elohim" or something like that. That God all of a sudden saw Noah and said, "Oh, maybe there's still hope in this project," And it always has reminded me of, like, you have a child, or my stage of life, you have a dog, and the dog can make you absolutely crazy, like totally nuts, and then the dog looks at you, or your child looks at you, or your grandchild, whatever, and your heart melts right there, and this you're in it for life, you're in it for life. So there's that moment, and the other moment is when it says that God is nicham, God regrets, right? What I guess creating the earth the first time around. It's really a striking passage and statement.
It's an interesting thing, though, sort of looking at the story of Noach, that God has big plans for Noach, and God also has big plans for the world at that time, right? So when you're going back into those days, we start off the Torah portion, and it says that Noach was a righteous and pure person, pure man, B'doratav, in his generation. And then we realize, or we quickly learn, that humanity has become immoral and corrupt, and that corruption and immorality is sort of pervasive.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to me to sometimes just pause and say, there are times when the world actually does feel like, people have lost their way or are losing their way. And then in that moment, God says to Noach, like, go and build a teva, like, go and build an ark. And the instruction to Noach was to build the ark in a public space. Mm-hmm. And he took, a really long time. Was it like 125 years or something like that? 120 years to build the ark. And the whole idea of the project was that people were supposed to come over to him and say, like, hey, Noach, like, what are you doing? And he was supposed to say, I'm building this ark because God told me to build it, because God is actually considering, or God intends to bring on a flood that's going to destroy us because we've all become so corrupt and immoral. And then people would hear that was the plan and change their ways, but it actually doesn't work.
Yeah.
He does that whole project and he doesn't convince, in the entirety of the project, not one person, changes their ways.
Not that we know of. Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of Jonah going to Nineveh, and going into the city and saying, repent, repent. And there the people actually listen to him.
Yeah.
In 3 days, it takes 3 days. That's it. That's it. Maybe Noah was just a terrible procrastinator. I don't know. He couldn't.
Actually, the reason I would say that can't be is that the ark was actually a massive, like it was almost a cruise ship. I mean, we call it an ark, but it's 3 levels. It's
right.
really big.
Right. So we live now down near, very close to where people get on the cruises to leave Baltimore, and those ships are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievably large. But it must have been the Noah's Ark to have the animals and all those kinds of things. Speaking of procrastinating, last night we had dinner, and Gail was finally able to put her feet up. She had a really crazy day. She saw like 1 million patients, and I'm doing the dishes, and also the World Series game is on at the same time. It takes me like probably 4 hours to do the dishes. I like wash a glass. I said I go look at the game. What's the count? I wash a dish. I go back. I said it's unbelievable.
Did you see that moment in the game where everybody stood? If they had someone, everyone stood and held a sign for someone that they loved who had cancer.
No, I did not see that. No, I didn't see it.
It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Do you remember when it was? I didn't watch the whole game.
No, I
finally had to stop watching the game so I could finish the dishes. I mean, was it the 7th inning? I wonder if they did the 7th inning stretch.
Maybe. I don't know. My tears were falling like down. I mean, it was absolutely magnificent. They really took a moment to acknowledge. And every person, literally every player, every coach, every umpire, like they held up, the person that they were.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it was amazing. Okay, back to Noach though.
So why do you think people did not listen to him? Why do you think people didn't pay attention? Like too far gone, or he didn't convey the message, in a compelling enough way, or I don't know. Or maybe it's like so unbelievable.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Right,
like people are like,
right,
what?
Right. Consequences that are that dire, that great. It's an interesting thing, and you raised the question of Jonah, or the sort of juxtaposed Jonah's story, because Jonah actually really didn't want to go to Nineveh. Right. He really he was not interested in saving those people. He was actually annoyed with God for giving him that task, and he felt like they're a terrible people. The just consequence for their behavior is to just destroy them.
Right.
And what Jonah knew is that God's compassion was going to win out over God's just desire for justice. In Noach's case, it's interesting to me, and I don't know if this is solving it, but maybe it's getting closer to solving it, is that Noach sort of says okay, you can almost add Abraham into that mix, right? Because Abraham eventually is going to fight for the people of Sodom, of Sodom and Gomorrah. But what Noach does is different, because when God says to him, go into the ark, you and your family, and Noach's like, okay, and he goes into the ark. The door closes. God closes the door, and then they set sail, and it feels like Noach he wasn't actually super concerned about the well-being of all of the people that lived there. Yeah. I mean, he didn't say to God wait a minute, let's talk this out. Maybe I could try it again, or maybe I just need more time, or maybe there's a different way that we could more effectively convince the people to change.
Right.
He sort of acquiesces and seems reluctant when the ride is over / the flood is gone. God has to call on him again. Noach, to get him out of the ark.
Right.
I don't know what it was about his character.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe he just didn't have it in him, or didn't want to. We all know folks who, say, gee, I should do this. I would like to do this, but I just can't. I just can't do it. You know?
Tired.
Yeah, I'm tired. I'm this. I'm that. I mean, he had a lot on his plate already, I guess. It is interesting, though. That I really like how you juxtapose that idea with Abraham and the argument that he presents to God about Sodom and Gomorrah. But in the end, Abraham's argument doesn't get him anywhere either. You know, so I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that because the end of the story? Okay, so finally it's 40 days, 40 nights, because that's, I would say, the Bible's way of saying a long time. Everything's 40. So the floodwaters recede, the rainbow, right, which is a beautiful idea.
The raven, the dove, the rainbow.
Yeah, really beautiful idea, actually. Sort of what is that incredible thing that every once in a while you see in the sky, and the authors of the Torah say, what it is a symbol of God's sort of eternal promise to humanity, to in a sense always keep a world there for them from this point forward. So it's a beautiful idea. But then Noah really seems to kind of struggle, almost fall apart, like at the end of the story. What do you make of that? It's PTSD?
I think for sure, and it's an interesting thing that Noach basically, I mean, in some form, right? He witnesses the world being almost destroyed, and for sure devastated, losing really. I mean, every person, every part of God's creation really was pretty much destroyed, and then he's invited to come out into that world, and him and his family. And
post-apocalyptic.
It is. It really is. It's sort of it's almost unfathomable. Right. Like to get out of the ark and to see a world that has known such devastation, and where there's no community, and there's no people, and there's no stores, and there's no, there's no grass.
There's
right.
Nothing.
It's a crazy thing.
Yeah,
and then you walk into that, and he does the only thing I think that he can even imagine to do is he starts to plant a vineyard, and then we see, sort of getting to your PTSD part, like he ends up planting that vineyard, and then the next thing we know, we see him drunk on the ground. But I feel like that part of me, that empathetic part of me, can certainly imagine why someone would need to self-soothe or try to escape from the reality. Like, that is so huge, and now here he is sort of responsible for building a new world.
Right. So like so many of virtually every character in the Torah, significant flaws are presented to us as readers, along with significant positive qualities. So back to your opening statement, Tamim haya b'dorotav. So he was perfect in his generation, of course. And what does that mean? So do you think it means he was perfect in any generation? In other words, he was tzaddik in any generation, or was it just given the other options at the time?
He was the best of.
Yeah, he was the best of.
It's funny. I think I've played around with that question in my mind for many years, but I think really what I tend to take from that clause of in his generation is that we are deeply impacted by the people that we surround ourselves with. And we sometimes underestimate that, like the power of our community, and also the idea that we really do rise together and we fall together. And I think in the world that we're living in today, there's a part of, and I wonder from you, like, there are so many pieces of this story, this historical moment in time, that I feel like really resonate. How about you? Are there any things that you're like,
with contemporary? Well, so it's interesting that we get into a conversation about Noach, and we talk about kind of a post-apocalyptic narrative, which it really is, and the popularity of post-apocalyptic narratives today. Both in literature, largely science fiction related literature, in movies, a lot of young adult literature is post-apocalyptic. you know, and maybe it does reflect a time when things are unsettled to the point where people are saying, I feel like this could be the end, you know, it could like it's, or maybe they're saying that the world cannot continue to exist in this way, so it must exist in some other way.
Yeah.
You know, it must exist in some other way.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
I would say to that also, you know, I can connect with that feeling that God must have had, which is like, how are we ever going to make things better?
Right.
You know, just that feeling sometimes of helplessness when we look at the challenges that our world is facing that feel so big. And this question of, will we, you know, as humanity in this moment of time, be the ones who are able to, you know, turn things around for the better? And I think in some ways, like that rainbow is a reminder to me that, you know, God regretted God's choice of sort of hitting the reset button and, you know, wiping out a generation to have a new generation arise. And I think in some ways, you know, it reminds me that we have to be the ones. We can't leave it to others or another generation.
Yeah. No, I think 100%. It's very Jewish, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, so really, I think it's a very Jewish idea that, you know, it's the old story of the guy waiting to be saved, and then the boat comes by, et cetera, et cetera. It's that whole thing. And along those lines, and maybe we can wrap it up with this. I got to get down, of course, to Zoom number X thousand of the day or whatever. So tonight at the board meeting, I'm gonna actually reference The Lord of the Rings, which is one of my favorite book actually. And there's a passage early on where Frodo, he's going to have to go on this quest, and he doesn't really want to do it, and it's going to be very difficult and dangerous, and et cetera, et cetera. And he's talking with Gandalf, and he says, why was I born now? You know, or why is this happening to me? And Gandalf's response essentially is to say, you know, all people who are born and live through difficult times ask that question, but the real question you have to ask yourself is, what do you do at the time in which you're born? You know, and that's to your point. That's to your point, the Torah. Exactly. All right, Rabbi Saroken.
Yay, thank you. I know. Thanks for being with us, and we'll be back soon.
Our producer, Jeremy.
Boo!